Hi, I'm Christopher, a research software engineer with Research Software Workshops, and it's a very warm welcome to part 5 for Git for Collaboration. The link to the material is at the bottom of this page, and if you go to the pull request section, you'll reach this page. Now up till now, you've been able to push to your own fork and to pull from both your fork and from the Upstream repository. This has let you make changes to your fork, but has forced you to kind of accept the changes that were made to Upstream to the original repository, or you kind of always in conflict with them and sort of having to always resolve that conflict. And this is causing increasing conflict as your fork and the original Upstream begin to drift apart. Now what you want is an ability to somehow push the changes that you make to your fork into the original Upstream repository so that they can see what you're doing and decide to accept it or not. This way you can tell the original creator that you want to use gas, and you can maybe push in the changes in the files needed to switch from electric to gas. Now, pushing changes to someone else's repository is considered quite rude. You're forcing your ideas upon them. And normally you don't even have permission to push to someone else's repository. So for example, if you typed git push upstream main, you should see an error. Indeed, if I type that, git push upstream main, it will say I don't have permission to actually push to that. And indeed, even if I granted you permission, if the original owner granted you permission to actually push to that repository, it would still be a bad thing for you to do to just push your changes in without having any discussion, because you deciding to switch from electric to gas could cause upset, argument or problems. So the alternative to forcing a push of your changes into someone else's repository is instead to ask them a question, is to ask them would they like to pull your changes into their repository themselves. This request to pull is also known as a pull request. You can make a pull request on any repository you like, even if you don't have permission to push to that repository, and indeed GitHub makes it really easy. So you start off to issue a pull request. Let's go to the web interface. So I'm going to go to the project and go back to the main project. Okay. And what you need to do is you first need to click on the pull request icon, which is here. Now if I click on that, this will open up a dialog which will look something like this. Okay. Now you can decide where you would like your branch to be pulled into. So in this case, we're going to request a pull from my fork, Chris at Home Super Project, a pull from into the original Chris Wood Super Project. So it's from origin to upstream in this case. So the repository on the right is the repository from which you are requesting the pull, and this is our forked repository. Mine is Chris at Home Super Project, and the repository on the left is the repository which you're requesting should perform the pull, which in this case should be the original Upstream repository, so Chris Wood Super Project. The best way to remember this is to read this dialog as I am requesting that the repository on the left pulls in changes made in the repository on the right. Now if we look at this now, we can see there's this little green tick here. This little green tick means that there are no current conflicts between these repositories, and so you can create the pull request. And it's considered really good manners to only raise pull requests which have this green tick and there are no conflicts. If there's a cross here and there is a conflict, then you as the person who's making the pull request should resolve them, as you did in the last page where you merged in, you pulled it, and then you basically resolved those conflicts. So given that there are no conflicts here, you can see these are all the changes that are going to be pulled in, what you can now do is click Create Pull Request. This will open a dialog that likes this, where you can now put in some information about why you're making that pull request. So you put in a title. So I'm going to say, could we install gas in the kitchen? Okay. And then give a reason for it, because you're asking someone to pull in something you've written and they may never have heard from you before. So you can do this to anybody, anywhere, any Git repository. So put enough information they can understand why you're making this pull request. So in this case, I'm going to say, I think it would be better to install gas in the kitchen and use that for cooking and heating. Here are the changes needed to install gas rather than electric. What do you think? So again, be nice, friendly. This is almost like you're sending an email or a chat to someone. Be sort of nice and open to it, and make sure you're polite. As I said, this message is your way of communicating with the owner of Upstream, politely making your case for your changes. There are also links to the GitHub community guidelines. Should I just show you those? So basically, if you click on here, there's like a community guideline to basically say how you should talk, how you should behave when you're sort of making these requests. But it's common sense, be polite, be kind. And it's basically to help you make sure that your message is polite and respectful, thereby making it much more likely that the owner of the Upstream repository will read it, and then they won't be offended, and maybe they'll even consider what you've asked. Now, once you've written your message, you can then click the Create Pull Request button. So I click this now. There we are. It has now created the pull request, and it has now set a message to the owner of the Upstream of this branch, Chris Wood's main for Super Project, that a pull request has been made. Now, they will then get a message. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what this looks like. So I'm just going to bring this window across here. Hopefully this will work. Okay, so if this is their window, and they will see that there's been a pull request made, and they can see, look, could we install gas in the kitchen? And they can see the message you've made, they can see the changes that are here. And what you also get with this is they have an option to merge it if they want, but they also have a discussion box. So they can maybe send a message back to you. So maybe they can say, I really think that electric is better. Could you give me some compelling reasons why you prefer gas? Thanks. Smiley face. And there we are. They've now sent a message back. I'll just move this out the way again. And what you'll see is that message has popped up. This is basically like a chat. Now, if you had notifications on, you would actually see a notification pop up on your phone, maybe if you were connected to GitHub, to say the chat is here. And this is how we can have this kind of like live discussion. And it's kind of semi-asynchronous because you'll send a message and then maybe when they next look at the repo, they'll see this and they'll respond to it. But this is how you begin to communicate. And as I said, to resolve conflict, you really do need to communicate. It's the most important thing you can do when you work with other people. Now, this pull request is still open. And this doesn't mean you have to stop working. You can actually continue to be making changes. Indeed, both of us can continue to be making changes. So, for example, maybe I, as the original owner of the repository, I don't want to stop working. I still want to continue working on gas, on electric. So I'm going to make another change to this. I'm going to do planning stage1.md. I'm working on electric here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to install a circuit breaker because, electric could be dangerous. So install electric circuit breaker. Of course, I'm going to now git commit that. Need for safety. Push that in. But now that I've made this change is now introducing conflict because, I've changed this file that's been the one we've been conflicting with. And if we now look, we can actually see GitHub has updated this pull request and said, aha, it used to be that, there were no conflicts in this pull request, but now we can see there are conflicts. And, having those conflicts means that now this pull request cannot be automatically merged. Again, it's your responsibility as the person who made the pull request to resolve these conflicts for the other person. Don't make other people resolve your conflicts in pull requests. Now you could, if you wanted to, click the resolve conflicts and resolve them in the GitHub web interface. I find that a little bit messy to use personally, so I'm going to resolve the conflict using the terminal. So again, git pull upstream main. we can see we have this conflict in planning stage 1, and I'm going to now basically edit that and do just what we did on the last page, where we're going to basically try and resolve this conflict. Now in this case, there will be other electric things within the kitchen, so actually having an electric circuit breaker is completely fine. So what I'll do is I will keep the gas, get rid of the boiler and the heaters, but I will keep that electric circuit breaker, and that kind of makes sense. Get status, we can see, yep, we've both modified it, but I've resolved it. Commit it, it's a merge, so it doesn't need a message, and when I now push, up it goes. And what we can see now is it rechecks, and now we've resolved the conflict. It is possible for the person to be able to merge without a conflict now, although I've still made this about gas. Now, this decision to accept or reject the pull request is ultimately that of the owner of Upstream, so there's no reason for them to accept every change that somebody sends to them. It's their choice ultimately. So, if they don't want to use gas, then they don't. And to be honest, your projects should then fork, and you then become separate projects, and you don't bother working with Upstream again. But, if you have a conversation, at least you've discussed it, and then, maybe things will work out. And, bear in mind that some conflicts can be unresolvable. This might be somewhere where they're really committed to electric, you're really committed to gas, there isn't a halfway house, so it may not happen. Equally, when you send a pull request, you're also asking for Upstream, the person who runs Upstream, to maybe maintain your code in the future. So if you write a quick bit of code to fix something and then you issue a pull request to have that included in the main project, ultimately you're going to be maintaining that in the future, or will you expect somebody else to? And so perhaps, they'll reject it because they don't want to support code that they haven't written, or maybe the code's not written in a way that's compatible with the style of that project, or the license terms, etc. So do remember, a pull request is just a request. It can be rejected, and it's not a bad thing for it to be rejected. It's not personal, it's just the way the projects go. Now, if your pull request is rejected, then, ultimately it's an acknowledgement your conflict is not resolvable, and your fork and Upstream will now diverge. And forking of projects into separate things is not a bad thing. We can end up with small seeds, lots of different projects that will then grow into lots of different but related trees. Now in this case, I'm going to reject your pull request, as this is going to remain an electric kitchen. So if I just bring this across here, okay, I'm going to reject the pull request. So if I wanted to accept it, I click merge pull request, and then my branch would be changed. And I basically would just click the main bit there. But actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to reject it, and I reject it by clicking close pull request. I'm going to put a little message in saying, sorry, we are in a clean air zone, and a new build. And this is a new build. And there are rules against using gas. It is more environmentally friendly to use electric. And that's that. And I'll then do close with comment. So now what I've done is I've rejected the pull request. It no longer shows up in my list of pull requests. If I click there, it's now gone. And what you get, if I now move this back out of the way, you can now see it's been closed, and I've commented, sorry, that's the way it is. Now, if I had accepted the pull request, then I would have pulled your changes into Upstream. We would have switched over to being a gas-powered kitchen, and you would no longer see any more conflicts when you're pulling from Upstream via git pull upstream main. And indeed, you would be working on gas, I'd be working on gas, we'd be back in harmony again. As I've rejected your pull request, you kind of have two choices. As I said, you can stay with gas and accept that your fork will now drift away from Upstream, and probably you don't pull from Upstream again, or you only do so periodically in different files. Or you can accept that maybe, yes, the project should now go to gas, should go to electric rather than gas. And indeed, that's what we're going to do now. We're going to assume, okay, we made a request, it didn't work, so we're now going to switch over to using electric. Now, the conflict was all in this planning stage 1.md, which was listed there. We should probably switch over to the version which is in Upstream, And what we can do is we can selectively check out files that exist in a different repository, in this case in the Upstream repository. So if I type here git checkout upstream main, so this is going from the main branch in the Upstream repository, then minus minus, this means I'm now going to be checking out a specific file from that other repository. I'm going to take planning stage 1.md. There we are. We can now see that means we've modified this because we've changed it. And if we look at planning stage 1.md, you can see this is the version that came from the Upstream repository exactly. Now, because this is the one that came from the Upstream project exactly, this is what I want. I'm now going to commit that. Say accepted that this will be a gas kit, be electric kitchen. Switching from gas to electric. And I can then push that to my fork. And now if I do git pull upstream main, sorry, not ain, main, there we are. There's no conflict anymore because we now have the same file again. And if I pull myself, again, no conflict anymore, everything is fine. Right, let me go back to my fork. So again, I can refind my one by going in here, looking under the list of my repositories. My repositories there is super project, which was forked from Chris Wood's super project. And you can see, look, we've accepted this will be an electric kitchen. And when we look under planning, stage 1.md, we can see we're here. One thing to always remember is that we always have the history. So if we decide to go back later, we can see actually we can go back to our gas versions. You know, if we wanted to go back to revert to an old one, remember this is still version control. All of the versions are always saved. Okay, that's taken us through all of this. And so now if you click on next, you'll move on to the next page of the workshop. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video.